So we've all heard of this new alt-right business. The new political movement that espouses racist, populist nationalism for a new generation. They're not your daddy's conservatives. They don't just dislike minorities and love Donald Trump. They've got memes, and not just any memes, frog memes. And they masturbate to Japanese cartoons. This is basically the new counterculture. And as a globalist, Jewish, neoliberal, I could rant about the alt-right for hours. But that's not what this video is about. Instead, in this video, I want to address the alt-left. Now, obviously, I understand these are all contestable terms. They're not well defined, and they're just labels. They're simple labels we put on complex people and complex ideologies. But I think there's a real problem with the alt-left. So let me define it and explain a few people who fit into this category. So what are the features of the alt-left? Well, first, obviously, it's people who are on the left side of the political spectrum. They're vaguely socialist, they want higher taxes, they want more social programs, they want stringent regulations on banks, polluters, and big businesses. They're against money in politics. And that's all well and good, right? I mean, I largely agree with those ideas. I'm vaguely on the left or the center left. But the alt-left takes those things and puts a particular spin on them. For the alt-left, it's really not conservatives that they're against. It's the cultural and political elites on the left that they detest most passionately. It's Hillary Clinton, Tony Blair, Barack Obama, George Clooney, Hollywood leftists, and liberals who have the temerity to have a nice house in the suburbs. These are people who didn't just back Bernie Sanders. They detested Hillary Clinton, and perhaps they didn't even vote for her. Perhaps they voted for Donald Trump, Jill Stein, or refused to vote for that sketchy bitch Hillary Clinton. These are the people who say Hillary rigged the primary. She stole it from Bernie. These are people on the left who have spent more time in 2017 expressing anger at Cory Booker and Tom Perez than Donald Trump. So that's the left part. But what makes them the alt-left and not just the left? Well, I think there's three big characteristics. One is a focus on defending right-wing authoritarian regimes, simply because they stand in the way of the so-called neoliberal world order. For example, you'll see these guys defend Bashar al-Assad and Vladimir Putin. Two, an overall conspiracism, a willingness to defend and entertain ridiculous ideas. Whether it's the truly batshit insane conspiracies like Pizzagate, or more mainstream theories like the idea that the DNC was hacked by an insider and not the Russian government. The final characteristic is an obsession with tone policing the mainstream left. These are people who want to tell you over and over and over again, this is why Trump won, dude. Hillary Clinton couldn't appeal to the steelworkers because she's a corporate bitch. That's not to say that any kind of self-criticism from Democrats is necessarily wrong. But what these alt-left guys tend to do is analyze everything as a failure of liberal elites. Nobody else has moral agency for them. It's just the liberal elites failed to fix the problems and their fault. Again, that's why you notice that these guys attack Cory Booker more than Hillary Clinton. But enough of that overall theory. Let's name some names. Where do you find these people? It's three basic places. You've got the indie alternative media, places like the Young Turks. You've got state-run propaganda media, places like RT and Sputnik News. And finally, you have the most colorful characters, the gamer dweebs of YouTube. So let's take a look at them first. Two of the most popular gamer dweeb YouTubers are Sargon of Akkad and The Amazing Atheist. Incredibly, The Amazing Atheist has 1 million YouTube subscribers, and Sargon of Akkad has 500,000. So don't let the silly names and lack of establishment credibility fool you. These people have some influence. Just because somebody has a name that sounds like it was an alias they created for World of Warcraft or Halo 2 or Super Mario Bros. Bash Blast doesn't mean they don't actually have a lot of influence, particularly on young people who get their news completely online and from social media. So take this Amazing Atheist guy. On one hand, obviously being an atheist tends to align you with the left. If your name's The Amazing Atheist, you're not a Christian conservative. What's more, it turns out this guy was a Bernie Sanders supporter. So who does he support in the general election? Donald John Trump.
I will probably not vote, but if you are inclined to vote, I say vote for Trump.
Albeit not enthusiastically, he supported him over Hillary Clinton. Then you look into his reasoning. You see these same alt-left talking points. Hillary Clinton's a neocon. She kills people with drone strikes. Hillary wants to start a war with Russia over Syria.
And she was saber-rattling against Russia, and she really still is. She wanted to enforce this terrible no-fly zone in Syria that might have put more U.S. troops on the ground there, and very well might have put us in the situation of being forced to decide whether or not to shoot down a Russian plane. And if we shoot down a Russian plane, guess what? Best case scenario, that re-escalates the Cold War. Worst case scenario is World War III. Which maybe some of you are eager to get that going, but I'm not particularly interested. That seems like something that might affect me.
She wants to impose the neoliberal hegemony of NAFTA and TPP on the world. And then you see the conspiracism part. The amazing atheists push the idea that Hillary Clinton had a massive seizure disorder.
But there's another reason to think Hillary might not be healthy. Like, what the hell is up with this video? I mean, what is she doing? She's either having a seizure or she's fucking bonkers. So Hillary suffers from seizures? Does she? I don't know. Is there more evidence? Yes, there is.
That rendered her totally incompetent to be president. And he still holds to these positions today. Even now that Trump is president and enacting a conservative Republican agenda, he still says Hillary Clinton would be worse.
And people still ask me, surely you must admit now that Hillary would have been better. No. She's been on both sides of every issue, for one thing, so I have no idea what she actually stands for, if anything. Trump, meanwhile, he's been keeping quite a few more of his campaign promises than even I expected. So with Trump, we really did kind of know what we were getting.
As an example, he still thinks that Hillary Clinton would be exactly where Trump is on banking issues, on the economy. I'd ask this guy, what do you think of the fact that Hillary Clinton was being advised by Joseph Stiglitz? But of course, this guy's never heard of Joseph Stiglitz. He wouldn't know Stiglitz if he appeared in front of him and carved a demand curve into his forehead with a razor blade. But that's what we get with these fools on the internet. We don't get a discussion of the fiduciary rule. We don't get a discussion of Dodd-Frank. We get some idiot's opinion based on a rumor he heard at the vaping store. So that brings us to Sargon of Akkad. He's another one of these pale, 30-something, looks 40-something, could stand to lose 50-something pounds guys who is prominent on alt-left YouTube. He came to prominence as an anti-feminist video game advocate, and he's about as cool as you'd expect. He exemplifies the alt-left to a T. He's an avowed left-winger who, although he's from England, voiced his support for Bernie Sanders during the primary.
Okay, so I'm talking with Voltaire's Ghost and Arch Warhammer about why I support Bernie Sanders over Donald Trump.
He exemplifies supporting authoritarian regimes because they're anti-American perfectly. Not only does he defend Vladimir Putin at almost every turn, he actually defended Vladimir Putin poisoning journalists with polonium. I know that sounds unbelievable, but just listen to it.
The idea of judging these things on moral values is highly subjective. And you won't get Putin to agree to these moral values because he will tell you that he...
Sargon, I don't think killing your opponents is subjective as a moral, to be honest with you.
Well, I
think we can say that's pretty bad.
Under an ethical
Okay, your enemy is a Nazi who's killed the Jews. Is it okay to kill him?
We're talking about Democrats here.
Yeah,
that's a small D.
Yes, I know, but this is the point, right? Putin is operating from a greater ethical standard. He is concerned about the health of his nation on the world stage, and objectively,
a greater ethical standard. Are you pitching for a job with RT? This is ridiculous.
Kevin, Jesus, listen to your bias. I don't care about Russia.
I know, right? It's insane. I could give you a laundry list of examples. He backed every Russian propaganda conspiracy in the book, including believing their denials of the fact that they hacked the DNC.
And in fact, they never at any point give any evidence for it being Russia. They just state that it's Russia, and it's just presupposed throughout the entire document.
But perhaps the most egregious one is that Sargon of Akkad is the defender of Pizzagate.
And this is the human cost of these paedophile rings. This is a picture of a child who has been chained to the wall, and in the top right of the picture is her disassociated self. You can see that the physical body of the child being chained to the wall is entirely opaque, whereas in the top right, I think what's being displayed is the disassociated personality of the child, which is translucent and floating away from the body. This is a motif that features throughout the artwork of Rhea Pratt, and you'll also see there is backwards writing on the walls that is always some version of "help us" or "kill us."
Yes, Pizzagate. True, he's not alleging there's actual proof, but the fact that this guy takes Pizzagate as a serious possibility, as a serious theory, any outlandish allegation against a center-left politician must be taken seriously. This is truly where the alt-right meets the alt-left. Similarly, this guy takes opposing left-wing pieties from political correctness to feminism to an outrageous degree where it blends with the alt-right. It's not just that Hillary's feminism pissed off too many working-class whites in the Midwest. No, this guy literally justified Elliot Rodgers' shooting rampage in Santa Barbara as an inevitable outgrowth of feminism.
They are people who have had really bad experiences in this life, and you don't care.
And no, it's not all men who act this way. But you know what? It's way too f***ing many.
Which is ironic, considering that before your stupid social justice feminine bullshit, it didn't happen on this scale. It's crazy. This is a disease of the modern age. You are responsible for perpetuating it by disenfranchising these poor fucking guys who don't have any options left. When someone takes the option of absolute, insanely last resort, you have to wonder what kind of system is producing them. And I tell you what, Lacey, it is a fucking feminist system that's doing this.
The second group is the slightly more intellectual crowd, the actual journalists. Two examples that have come to my attention both work at the Young Turks Network. Jordan Sheridan and Michael Tracy. Mr. Sheridan was the primary political reporter for the Young Turks Network during the primary and general election campaigns. He was very clearly a supporter of Bernie Sanders, and this support not only took him through the primary campaign, but his antipathy towards Hillary Clinton drove him into an obsession with the WikiLeaks story. He essentially became the journalistic voice of the Bernie or Bust movement, the Bernie supporters who refused to vote for Hillary Clinton. That's not to say you can't report on WikiLeaks, but the way he reported on them was specifically to take things out of context, to take normal events, like the Hillary Clinton campaign emailing reporters to discuss stories, and turn them into collusion, a conspiracy between the Clinton campaign and reporters.
Donna, do you owe the voters an apology for passing a question for a town hall off to the Hillary Clinton campaign?
Sir, you know what? I wish when you got your facts, you read the emails. And
I did read a lot of them.
Well, you clearly did not read my email, sir.
It was just totally dishonest and unprofessional. So how does this guy fit my rubric? Is he an apologist for authoritarian right-wing regimes? Yes. He was essentially a propaganda arm of WikiLeaks and the Russian intelligence service. And as I said, he defended Russia's malign influence on our campaign by denying the evident fact that they had hacked the DNC. Does he engage in conspiracy thinking? Yup. He has repeatedly argued that the Democratic primary was rigged. In the obvious sense, this is ridiculous. Bernie Sanders received 43% of the vote in a two-way race. Of course he lost. Majority rules, right? To get around this basic fact, Jordan created a vast panoply of canards. Ideas like Hillary Clinton cheated because she got too many endorsements. It beggars belief. Obviously, the candidate who has better political connections will get more endorsements. It's essentially like saying that Shaquille O'Neal cheated at basketball by being too tall. And not only that, the fact that she was an establishment candidate was both a blessing and a curse. Anyone could see that the political environment of 2016 favored the upstart. Jeb Bush didn't go very far, did he? She did much worse with independents, and she did better with Democrats. That's exactly what you would expect based on the strengths and weaknesses of the two candidates. And that's how politics works. Some candidates will win, and some will lose. It's because of their strengths and weaknesses. When you say rigged, you obviously mean that someone cheated. Someone broke the rules. Not that somebody was more charismatic than the other. Not that one got more endorsements. Not that one had a better resume. And that's how all the rigging arguments break down. It's all just taking aspects of the political process that you dislike and calling that rigging. It doesn't make a lick of sense. That brings us to his colleague, Michael Tracy, the dean of alt-left journalism, the Robert Novak, the David Broder, Everything I said about Cheriton basically applies to Michael Tracy. He peddled Russian talking points on Syria, he obfuscated from the fact that Russia had hacked the DNC, and he actually advocated not voting in the 2016 election because he was ambivalent between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. He has an almost fanatical commitment to downplaying the issues with the alt-right. In a recent article, he actually said that anti-Semitism isn't a major issue in the United States. He didn't even recognize the fact that Jews are the #1 target of religious hate crimes in the United States. And he makes this point in the midst of a campaign of bomb threats against Jewish community centers. That's not to say that America is an intensely anti-Semitic country, because it's not. I'm Jewish myself, and I really appreciate the fact that America is one of the best places for Jews to live in the entire world, and has served as a refuge for the Jewish people. And yes, not every Republican is an alt-right Pepe meme Twitter troll. Even as I'm deeply disgusted by Donald Trump and the way politics has gone in the last year, I freely admit that the average American is still a fundamentally decent person. But what it comes down to is a question of focus. This guy must send out 50 tweets a day complaining about the fact that other journalists are covering other stories. Other journalists are spending too much time worrying about Russia. Actually do the reporting and debunk their stories, or cover something else and tell us what we should be paying attention to. At the end of the day, this guy is just a feedback loop of concerned trolling about the left. And just as a metric, if you're a liberal, if you're a progressive, and most of your positive Twitter interactions are the far right agreeing with you, you're probably not helping your side very much. The final group who falls into the alt-left category are the state propaganda journalists, writers and TV personalities who work for the Russian government. Now, you could detail the people who fall into this group, whether it's Chris Hedges, Ed Schultz, or Lee Camp on Russia Today's English language television network, or the ex-Bernie Sanders, current Trump-supporting writer Cassandra Fairbanks for the Russian propaganda outlet Sputnik News. But it's not really worth it to debunk these people. Remember, they're being paid by the Russian state. RT is not, as some people claim, just the Russian version of CNN. It's the propaganda arm of an authoritarian regime which takes its disinformation campaigns seriously. But what I want you to notice is that so many people on the so-called alt-left repeat the exact same talking points from RT. If you claim to be a progressive or a lefty, and you're repeating exactly what Vladimir Putin wants you to say, you're a useful idiot at best. Perhaps the best definition of being on the alt-left is having that synchronicity with RT's propaganda.